Hey, my name is Nathaniel Calloway, but everyone's called me Nate since before I could walk. I'm 31 years old, and I was born into more money than most people see in 10 lifetimes. I'll tell you the ending first, because nobody in my family believes it even now. They had my whole marriage arranged before I'd ever met the woman I'd actually marry. They wanted a merger, a wedding that would join two fortunes. Instead, I brought home a waitress they had laughed at to her face, and the strangest part, the part none of them can stand, is that the woman they mocked turned out to be the only person alive who knew who my grandfather really was. Let me back up. The Callaways own hotels, restaurants, resorts with my last name lit up on the side in letters you can see from the highway. My older brother Preston runs the Eastern properties. My father, and Gerald, runs everything. And I was supposed to slide neatly into my place in the machine, marry the right girl, and produce the next generation of Callaways to keep the name lit up. But I never fit. I think it's because of the old man. My grandfather, Arthur Callaway, built all of it. And he built it from nothing. I mean truly nothing. He started at 14 washing dishes in a roadside diner for tips and a hot meal. He used to grab my wrist when I was a boy, his grip still iron even when he was old, and he'd say, "Nate, you want to know what a person's really made of? Don't watch how they treat the boss. Watch how they treat the people who can't do a single thing for them." Then he'd tap his own chest. I started in an apron, boy. Everything we have started in an apron. The day this family forgets, that is the day we've got nothing worth keeping. He said it my whole childhood. Never forget the apron. The trouble was, the family had already forgotten. Somewhere between the first diner and the highway signs, the Callaways stopped being people who'd come from the apron and started being people who snapped their fingers at the ones still wearing it. My father tipped like he was insulting the staff. Preston didn't tip at all. They'd built a hospitality empire, and somewhere along the way lost every ounce of the thing the word actually means. The old man saw it. It broke his heart. In his last years, he stopped coming to the company dinners, stopped showing up at the resorts. He'd go off on his own for hours and nobody knew where, and the family decided he was getting strange in his old age, and mostly they just let him be. He died 2 years ago. I was the only one who cried at the funeral. I want that on the record before I tell you the rest. About a year after we buried him, my father decided it was time I married Vivienne Crane. The Cranes own a hotel chain that overlaps with ours in 3 markets. A marriage between Nate Callaway and Vivienne Crane wouldn't be a romance. It would be a corporate restructuring with a cake. Vivienne was beautiful, in the way a magazine cover is beautiful. Perfectly assembled and somehow cold to the touch. We'd had dinner twice. Both times she spent more attention on her phone than on me, and I couldn't blame her, because we both knew exactly what we were. 2 assets being introduced before a merger. To seal it, my father booked a private dinner at the Ashbury, the finest restaurant in the city, the kind with no prices on the menu. The Cranes, the Callaways, Vivienne and me, a long table and a bottle of wine that cost more than a used car. Our waitress that night was named Ruby. I noticed her before anything happened, the way you notice the one calm thing in a loud room. She moved quickly and quietly, never flustered, with a warmth in how she spoke to people that the rest of that table didn't deserve. She had her dark hair pinned up and tired eyes and a small, real smile, and she called my grandfather's generation sir and ma'am, like the words still meant something. Then my father sent back the wine. There was nothing wrong with the wine. I knew it, the sommelier knew it, and Ruby knew it. But my father had decided to perform his power for the Cranes, and a returned bottle was the cheapest way to do it. Ruby apologized, though she'd done nothing, and brought another. He sent that one back too. By the third, Vivienne's father had joined in, and the 2 of them were making a sport of it, finding fault with everything she carried to the table. And Ruby kept apologizing and kept her chin up and kept being gracious, while 2 grown men, with more money than God, treated her like a thing they'd bought. Then she set down a plate, and my father looked at her over his glasses and said, loud enough for the next table to hear, "Tell me, do they let just anyone work here now? Or did you have to demonstrate you could at least carry a plate without ruining it?" The Cranes laughed. Preston laughed. Vivian smiled into her water glass. And I sat there. I sat there and I said nothing. That's my shame in this story, and I won't dress it up. I watched my family humiliate a woman who'd done nothing but her job, and I was so used to being the quiet one, the one who didn't make scenes, that I let it happen. Ruby's cheeks went red. She said, "Of course, sir. I'm sorry." And she gathered the plates and walked back toward the kitchen, with her spine perfectly straight. And I watched the door swing shut behind her and hated myself in a way I never had before, because I heard him. The old man. Watch how they treat the people who can't do a single thing for them. That was my family, and I just sat in it. I made an excuse halfway through dessert. I went to find her. She was in the narrow service hallway by the kitchen, and when she saw me coming, she straightened up. I braced for more. "Can I help you, sir? Is there a problem with—" "No," I said. "I came to apologize. For my father. For all of them. For me." I made myself hold her eyes. "What they did to you in there was cruel, and you didn't deserve a second of it. And I sat there like a coward and let it happen. And I'm ashamed of myself. I don't expect that to mean anything. I just couldn't leave without saying it." She studied me a long moment, the way you study a coin to see if it's real. "You're one of them," she said. "A Calloway." Unfortunately. Something shifted in her face. Not warmth exactly, but the lowering of a guard. "Most people who come back here come to complain more," she said. "Not to apologize." She let out a slow breath. "It's fine. It's not the first table like that, and it won't be the last. People with money sometimes forget the rest of us are people. You learn to let it slide off. You shouldn't have to." "No," she agreed. "But should have to and have to are different streets." She picked up a tray. "Thank you for coming back. You didn't have to. Go enjoy your dinner." I didn't enjoy my dinner. I barely spoke to Vivian, and I couldn't stop thinking about the waitress with the straight spine who'd said, "You learned to let it slide off," like it was a skill she'd practiced her whole life. 3 days later, I went back to the Ashbury alone to find her, and the host told me she only worked there 2 nights a week. The rest of the time, he said, she waited tables at a little diner across town, a place called the Bluebird. I knew the Bluebird. I didn't know how I knew it at first. The name sat in my chest like a key turning in a lock, and then it came to me, a thing from the funeral, a thing one of the old groundskeepers had said that I'd been too grief-blind to hear properly. Mr. Arthur used to take his lunch at that little diner, the Bluebird, every week, near the end. Said it reminded him of the old days. I drove there that afternoon. The Bluebird was a narrow place with cracked vinyl booths and a counter worn smooth by 60 years of elbows. And there was Ruby in a faded apron, pouring coffee for a table of old men who clearly adored her. She saw me come in and her eyebrows went up. "The apologizing Calloway," she said, "twice in 1 week. People will talk." I sat at the counter. "Can I ask you something strange? Stranger than chasing a waitress across town to say sorry?" "Sure. My grandfather." "Arthur Calloway. Did you—" I didn't get to finish. Her whole face changed. The coffee pot came down on the counter, and she pressed her hand flat against her chest, and her eyes filled so fast it startled me. "Arthur was your grandfather," she said. It wasn't a question. "Of course. Calloway. I never put it together. He never once told me. 2 years of Tuesdays, and he never said a word about who he was." She laughed, but it was wet. "He told me he'd been a dishwasher. He let me feel sorry for him." I had to grip the counter. "You knew him," I said. "I knew him," she said softly, and she came around the counter and sat on the stool beside me. And she told me about my grandfather, the real one, the one his own family had let wander off alone. He'd started coming in about 3 years before he died. He'd sit in the corner booth, the same one every Tuesday, and order the same thing, meatloaf, black coffee, pie if she'd talk him into it. At first, he was just a lonely old man, and she was kind to him the way she was kind to all the old men who ate alone, because, she said, a person who eats alone every week is hungry for more than the food. She never knew he was rich. He never let her. He drove himself in an old car he kept just for the purpose, wore plain clothes, and for 2 years he was simply Arthur, the dishwasher who'd done all right for himself, who came to the Bluebird because the fancy places had stopped feeling like anywhere at all. He used to watch me work, Ruby said. Watch how I handled the rude ones, the cheap ones, the lonely ones. And one day he said the strangest thing to me. Her voice went thick. He grabbed my wrist. He had this grip, this iron grip for an old man. And he said, Ruby, don't you ever let anybody make you ashamed of the apron. The apron is where the good ones come from. The ones who forget it are the ones who lost it. I couldn't speak. My eyes were burning. Those were his words, word for word. The words he'd said to me my entire childhood, the lesson his own sons had thrown away, he had carried, in his last lonely years, to a diner across town, and handed to a waitress who treated a forgotten old man with grace. She'd kept it. While his family kept the money, this woman had kept the only thing he actually cared about. He died on a Tuesday, Ruby said quietly. I didn't know for 2 weeks. I thought he'd just stopped coming. Then I saw a photo in the paper, Arthur Calloway, a hospitality magnate, and I realized the lonely man in the corner booth had owned half the skyline. She wiped her eyes. I went to the back and I cried in the walk-in for 20 minutes. Then I came out and poured coffee, because that's the job. He'd have understood that. I came back to the Bluebird every week after that. I told myself at first it was about him, that sitting in his corner booth, talking to the one person who'd known the man and not the magnate, was a way of staying close to my grandfather. And it was. But it became about her, too, faster than I'd admit. I learned her whole life over those weeks. Ruby Hayes, 28, raising her younger brother since their mother got sick. 8 years younger, a good kid, smart, headed for college if she could keep the rent paid and the lights on. 2 jobs to do it. And on top of both, 2 nights a week at the community college, working toward a nursing degree 1 impossible semester at a time, because she wanted to take care of people for a living and not just survive them. She never once complained about any of it. She never used a single piece of it as an excuse for anything. She just got up and did the next thing, with her chin up, the way she'd done with my father's cruelty at the Ashbury. She was the strongest person I'd ever met, and she was waiting tables for tips, and somewhere in those weeks I fell in love with her the way you fall asleep, slowly, and then all at once. One night I stayed until close. The last customer left, and Ruby flipped the sign and started wiping down the counter, and I grabbed a rag and started on the booths without being asked, and she watched me do it with a strange look. You know you're a Calloway, right? She said. You don't have to bus tables. My grandfather washed dishes until the day he could have bought the building, I said. I think I missed something, never learning how the place actually runs. I wiped down the corner booth, his booth, last, slow. Tell me one more thing about him. Anything. She set down her rag. She was quiet a moment, deciding something. Then she went to the back, behind the kitchen, and came out holding a paper bag, soft and creased from being handled, and she set it on the counter between us. He gave me this, she said, his last Tuesday. The one I didn't know was the last. She slid it toward me. I never knew what to make of it. Open it. Inside was an apron, old, worn soft and thin, the ties frayed, a faint stain at the hem that no wash had ever lifted. Plain canvas. Nothing about it worth anything to anyone. He pressed it into my hands like it was made of gold, Ruby said. He said, this was my first one. I washed dishes in this for 2 years. I've kept it 60 years because it's the only thing I own that's worth anything. Her voice wavered. He told me to keep it, that I'd know who to give it to someday. I thought he was just a sentimental old man. I almost gave it to the donation bin 100 times. She looked at me. I'm glad I didn't. I held my grandfather's first apron in my hands in the empty diner, and I understood that I was holding the actual beginning of everything my family had, the seed of every highway sign, every resort, every dollar my father had ever snapped his fingers over. And the old man hadn't left it to his sons. He hadn't left it to me. He'd left it with a waitress in a paper bag, certain she'd know who deserved it when the time came. He left it with the right person, I said. I'm starting to think, Ruby said softly. He left it for you to come and find. We sat in that booth until 2 a.m, the apron folded on the table between us, and I don't remember everything we said. I remember that when I finally drove home, I felt closer to my grandfather than I had at his own funeral, and closer to a woman I'd known a few weeks than to the family I'd known my whole life. My family found out, of course. They always do. Preston saw me leaving the Bluebird and reported back like he'd caught me at a crime. My father summoned me to his study, the Crane merger spread across his desk, and asked me to explain why I was slumming at a diner with the help 3 weeks before he expected to announce my engagement to Vivian. Her name is Ruby, I said. I don't care what her name is. He took off his glasses. Nathaniel, I have built something here. Your grandfather built something here. And I will not watch you throw away a strategic marriage and your share of this family for a waitress with a sob story. Marry the Crane girl. Keep the diner girl on the side if you must, men do, but you will not embarrass this name. And there it was, the whole rotten heart of it, laid out on the desk. I'd spent 31 years being the quiet one, the one who didn't make scenes. I'd sat silent at the Ashbury while they humiliated her, and that silence had cost me something I could still taste. I wasn't going to be silent again. You want to talk about the name, I said. Let's talk about the name. You know where Grandpa spent his last 2 years? Not with us. Not at the resorts. At a diner called the Bluebird, in the corner booth, alone, eating meatloaf, because his own family had become people he couldn't stand to sit with. My voice was shaking, but it didn't stop. And you know who sat with him? Who was kind to him when he was just a lonely old man with nothing to offer her? Ruby. The waitress you mocked at the Ashbury. The one you said could barely carry a plate. She's the only person in this city who knew who he actually was. And she found out he was rich after he died. And it didn't change a thing. Because she never wanted anything from him but his company. My father had gone very still. He gave her the apron speech, I said. The same one he gave me. The same one he gave you, before you decided you were too important for it. He spent his last years handing the only thing he cared about to a stranger in an apron, because his own sons had thrown it in the trash. I stood up. You want to know what'll embarrass this name? Not me marrying a waitress. You. You snapping your fingers at the exact kind of person who made everything you've got. The old man would be ashamed of this room. He told me so, in his way, every single Tuesday. I never knew about. I walked out. My father didn't say a word. There wasn't one to say. He cut me off, of course. The trust, the company seat, the name on the door, all of it, gone within the month. I'd known it would be. I found out you can lose a fortune in a single afternoon and feel lighter walking out than you did walking in. I told Ruby that night, or in the empty Bluebird after closing, both of us in a booth that wasn't the corner one, because the corner one would always be his. You walked away from everything, she said. For a girl you've known a couple of months. Nate, that's insane. You'll resent me. Everyone resents the thing that cost them their family. They stopped being my family the night they laughed at you, and I'll spend the rest of my life making up for not standing up in that moment, I said. And I didn't walk away from everything. I walked away from money. The only thing my grandfather ever wanted me to keep, I'm looking at. I reached across the table. He found you first, Ruby. I think maybe he was saving you a seat. She cried then. The way she hadn't let herself at the Ashbury. The way she'd cried alone in the walk-in. And then she took my hand. We didn't have a fortune to build on. We had her 2 jobs and my useless business degree and a beat-up car. I got work, real work. Managing a struggling restaurant for an owner who didn't care what my last name used to be. Ruby finished her nursing degree. I sat in the front row at her pinning ceremony and clapped until my hands hurt. Her brother got into college. We paid for it together, a semester at a time. The hard way, the only way either of us knew. We were married at the Bluebird. Where else? We closed it for an afternoon, filled the cracked vinyl booths with the people who actually loved us, and Ruby walked down the narrow aisle between the counter and the windows in a simple dress, past the corner booth, which we'd left empty, with a single plate of meatloaf on the table, and a cup of black coffee going cold beside it, for him. The man who found her first. It's been 4 years now. We're not rich. We will probably never be rich. But last spring I scraped together everything we had and bought the Bluebird from the old owner when he retired, and I run it myself, and I wash dishes some nights when we're short-staffed, in an apron, with my sleeves rolled up. The old men who adored Ruby still come in. Her brother busses tables on his breaks from school, and the corner booth has a small brass plate on it, now that says Arthur's Table, and nobody sits there, and everybody who works for me knows why. Above it, framed on the wall, hangs an old canvas apron, worn thin, frayed at the ties, a faint stain at the hem that 60 years never lifted. The customers ask about it sometimes. I tell them it's the first thing this family ever owned. And the most valuable thing we still do. The apron I wear on the nights I wash dishes is a new one. I haven't earned the old one yet. Maybe I never will. Maybe nobody does. And that's the point of keeping it on the wall where you have to look up to see it. But I put mine on every time with my grandfather's voice in my ears, and I roll up my sleeves, and I do the work he started in the room where the woman he loved like a daughter taught me what he'd really been trying to say all those years. For a long time I thought this was a story about a family that wanted me to marry a rich girl, and the waitress they mocked instead. But that wasn't the story. The story is that my grandfather built an empire out of an apron and watched his own sons grow ashamed of where it came from, and spent the loneliest years of his life looking for one person who still understood. He didn't find that person at the resorts, or the company dinners, or in his own family. He found her in a diner across town, pouring coffee for forgotten men, treating a stranger with the kind of grace that can't be bought with everything we owned. My family wanted me to marry up. What they never understood, what they were too far gone to understand, is that there was no up. Ruby was the top of everything that ever mattered. She'd inherited the only thing the old man cared about, and she didn't even know she was carrying it. I didn't marry beneath my family. I married the one person in the whole story who was worthy of the man who started it. Never forget the apron, he told me. I married the woman who never did.